Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, today I want to dive into a story that I've actually been doing research on the last couple of days because I'm going to be visiting this man's burial spot in a mass grave in Langemark outside of the town of Ypres. To me, from what I've learned already, this guy was the best pilot that the Germans had. It wasn't the Red Baron. It was Werner Voss. This guy, it was absolutely ridiculous what he did, and the way that he died is the kind of stuff that if you made it into a movie, no one would believe it. Because his death happened while he was taking on 8 German aces. An ace is anyone who has 5 confirmed aerial victories, 5 planes that they've shot down. And this guy took on 8 of them. 8 men who had 5 aerial victories. Some of these guys had dozens of victories. He took on 8 of them, and he put bullets in 7 of their planes before they brought him down. Just ridiculous kind of stuff. And his body ended up being lost after the battle in which he was buried, and he ended up being part of this mass grave with over 20,000 fellow German soldiers. So I thought we would take a look at Yarnhub today because they have a video about him. It's called The Bravest German Airman, and that's a quote from one of the men who shot him down. So let's go ahead and dive in today to the story of Werner Voss. As always, the link is in the description to the original content. We love Yarnhub, and I know Yarnhub loves our channel here, so always glad to support them. Please consider supporting them. I am a patron of Yarnhub and proud to be one.
It's September the 23rd, 1917, 1830 hours. In the skies over West Flanders, Belgium, the evening silence is suddenly shattered by the arrival of 3 German planes. Flanked by 2 wingmen in false D-3 biplanes, 20-year-old German ace Werner Voss's triplane barrels towards his enemies. Clad in a gaudy silk shirt, civilian boots, and a non-regulation leather coat, he cuts a dashing figure, a knight of the air. His senses on alert, he nudges the throttle forward, sensing the impending dogfight.
So let's talk for a minute about the background of Werner Voss. Like a lot of these prominent German pilots, he starts out in the cavalry. But the war in 1914 is very different than the war in 1917. And by and large, cavalry is no longer an effective use of military resources. You've now advanced to where there's tanks, and of course with trench warfare and the static nature of the war and the advent of the airplane, the plane has replaced the cavalry as the scouting wing and as the wing for kind of special missions and things like that. And so Richthofen, the Red Baron, as well as Werner Voss and many others start out as cavalry, and now they end up in the flying corps. Now, Werner Voss is interesting because he doesn't seem to get mentioned as often as a guy like the Red Baron, who's probably the most famous pilot of all time. But in the time frame in which Werner Voss was active, he had almost an identical number of aerial victories to Richthofen. Richthofen had 80. Werner Voss ends up with 48. But I think Richthofen, in the time that Voss had his 48, had 49. So they were almost identical. And Voss had 10 in a period of 8 days in the last weeks of his life. It's fair to say that had he lived as long as Richthofen did, he may have seen a very similar number.
Meanwhile, just minutes away, a formation of British fighters from the 56th and 60th Squadrons break through the clouds at 6,000 feet. To the east, another 24 German aircraft do the same. It's going to be an epic battle in the skies. Now converging at more than 200 miles per hour, the enemy pilots spot one another, and all hell breaks loose in an erratic snarl of dashing aircraft and droning engines.
Chaos.
Through the chaos, Australian ace Lieutenant Harold A. Hamersley and a Royal Aircraft Factory SE-5A sees what appears to be a comrade in dire straits. There's a German albatross on the heels of a British plane. Or is there? With so many mismatched planes in the sky, telling friend from foe is no easy matter.
Yeah, you got to remember, at this time, there's not a standard paint scheme that each side has. It's not that easy to just identify which ones are Germans. I mean, they've got the cross on it for the Germans, and the British have their own insignia, but the paint schemes are wildly various. I mean, every guy kind of had their own thing. Just there's a reason why the Red Baron's squadron was called the Flying Circus, because of the just mishmash of bright colors that they had.
Either way, Hammersley's eyes have just done him a potential fatal disservice. Both planes are German, and one is Voss's three-winged Fokker. Recognizing the blunder of his enemy, Voss tugs the stick hard, exploiting the triplane's superior maneuverability to get beside and behind Hammersley. Seconds later, his twin Spandau machine guns crack to life, sending high-velocity rounds rifling through the SE-5A's thin skin.
And one of the most one of my favorite inventions of the First World War is the invention that allowed these machine guns to fire through the propellers. Just a game changer when the Germans first developed that, because you're able to look right at what you're pointing at, and it all had to do with the chain that connected the two and allowed the timing to be, I mean, it's just a ridiculously cool invention to be able to come up with something like that.
Hammersley instinctively throws his machine into an inverted dive, but Voss won't be shaken, and more rounds rip through his wings while others spark off the engine cowling. Witnessing the life and death struggle just a few hundred yards away, a fellow pilot rushes to his friend's aid, but Voss peels off Hammersley, slips behind him, and peppers his rudder with .30 caliber bullets.
This is like some Top Gun stuff that this guy is pulling off in this battle. And like I said, we're going to take a look at in a few minutes the 8 British aces that he takes on in this battle.
Him out of the fight. Now 2 fighters line up for attack against the brash German airmen. Less than 1,000 feet above Voss and slightly to his right, they attacked from left and right, and soon the German was in the midst of 4 British machine guns. It's a dangerous pincer move that, if timed incorrectly, could result in a catastrophic collision.
And it's important that they mention that, because another German ace who is buried in that same mass grave in Langemark, where I'm going to be next week, and I'm going to tell that story when I'm there, actually was responsible for a collision that killed the father of German aviation, Oswald Botke. These guys followed what was called the Botke Dicta, which was basically, he was the one who invented their tactics that made them so successful as pilots. It's the reason why Werner Voss and Manfred von Richthofen were as successful as they were. And what happened was there was a collision, and it took Botke out, and it killed him. And the guy that collided with him actually contemplated suicide for a while, because he was so devastated over the fact that he felt responsible for killing this legend.
Though their aim is true, Voss flies through the hail unscathed, while buzzing both above and below 4 more British. Now boxed in on every side, Voss's situation is becoming more untenable by the second.
Okay, so let's talk about these 8 pilots that he's taking on at once here. Okay, so the 8 guys that he takes on are James McCudden, who by the end of the war, when he was killed, had 57 aerial victories. Remember, Red Baron had 80. This guy's got 57, okay? Keith Muspratt had 8 victories, making him an ace. Harold Hammersley had 13 confirmed victories. Arthur Rhys Davids, who's the guy who will eventually take down Voss, 27 aerial victories. Robert Chidlaw Roberts was actually responsible for killing another German ace, Max Ritter von Müller. It doesn't say here how many victories he had himself, but he was an ace as well. I'm trying to find it. Okay, it doesn't say here, but Max Ritter von Müller had 36 victories, a guy that he took out. Jeffrey Hilton Bowman, 32 victories. Reginald Hoyge, 28 victories. He's Canadian. And Richard Mayberry was Welsh, and he was also an ace. But let's see here. 21 victories. So, I mean, we're talking hundreds of victories between all these guys. It's just crazy. So it's not like he was taking on a bunch of amateurs. These were some of the best on the Allied side.
Disengaging, he attempts to outclimb his adversaries, but he's trapped in another vortex of fire, which again he barely evades by the skin of his teeth. But it seems Voss knows no fear. Despite being outnumbered, he throws his plane into a tight turn to meet his enemies head-on. Voss fires at a British fighter, but with a top speed of nearly 130 miles an hour and an engine optimized for high-altitude performance, the SE-5A is faster than Voss's triplane, and he speeds out of range.
So that's one advantage that the Allies have in this case. The triplanes are super maneuverable and great in close dogfight, but they don't have the speed at high altitude that this other plane does.
Now swooping in daringly, Canadian pilot Flight Lieutenant Peter Cronin carelessly overshoots his mark and winds up ahead of and under Voss, the worst possible position. He makes an erratic maneuver, but Voss's blazing Spandaus riddle his bird from close range, sending another enemy plane packing. Now in an all-out blitz to down Voss, the 4 British pilots throw themselves into the mix. The tension is reaching a fevered pitch. Voss flings his beleaguered plane into a disjointed series of climbs, dives and turns, never level flying for more than a few seconds.
And the craziest part of all of this is that Voss actually had a number of opportunities during this dogfight. The dogfight lasted about 10 minutes to get away, to escape, to disengage. But he chose to take these guys on. Now, it may have been stupid, it may have been foolhardy, but he chose to fight.
Lest his enemies get him in their crosshairs. But though he has multiple chances to escape, and despite worsening odds, Voss stays in the game. With bullets streaking past his open canopy and his engine screaming at full power, a friendly Albatross fighter dives to Voss's rescue, but is shot down before he can help with a few well-placed rounds through the engine. Now,
see how quickly these guys took out that other pilot. But Voss is able to last 10 minutes against some of the best.
Spiraling down to just 2,000 feet, Voss continues to bob, weave, and squeeze off bursts wherever he can in an unprecedented maneuver that wows his assailants. He intentionally throws the Fokker into a flat spin to get a bead on an English plane, miraculously never losing control. 2 of the British fighters swarm Voss, dispatching their remaining ammunition with abandon. Voss's plane takes a burst down the fuselage and into the cockpit, and for the first time in the engagement, the German warbird drifts into level flight, taking no evasive action as his pursuers close in. Now dipping below 1,000 feet, soon-to-be ace pilot Arthur Rhys-Davids slips behind Voss, firing at will. With the resulting loss of airspeed, Rhys-Davids comes to within a few feet of crashing into the stricken German's tail. Now descending rapidly, he follows Voss down to the ground, lower and lower, until with a crash, Voss's plane hit the ground. Witnesses later recalled that the plane disintegrated into 1,000 pieces. In all, the dogfight lasted less than 10 minutes, during which time Voss put bullets into nearly every plane that he'd engaged,
including 7 of the 8 aces that he was taking on, either present or future aces.
Back at base, the shaken pilots are given a brandy to settle their nerves. Most are speechless, others hyperventilate.
And the pilot who actually is credited with the aerial victory over Voss actually said that my chair's always making noises, actually said that he wished that he had brought Voss down alive. There is just this, it's hard for us to understand. There's this real palpable sense of honor that existed between these pilots and that existed by the men on the ground, this respect for these pilots. They really were like the knights of the air. I've said that before, but it's true. Just immense respect, even for a guy like Voss who had killed dozens of their comrades.
Some just weep. Although the true identity of their adversary is unknown, names like Richthofen, Wolf, and Voss are whispered by the men. That evening, the pilots toast their gallant foe, but it's not until the following day, when patrols locate the crash site, that they confirm that it had been the German air ace with 48 victories to his name, Werner Voss, behind the stick. One of the British pilots later said, "His flying was wonderful, his courage magnificent. In my opinion, he was the bravest German airman, who it had been my privilege to see fight.
It had been my privilege to see fight. Like I said, I'm in awe of the respect that these guys had for each other, even as they were trying to kill each other. It's such a weird thing to us who have never been in combat, but I guess you had to be there. Fascinating story. I posted this picture on Instagram last night as I was working on my research on the topic for my visit to the Langemark Cemetery. Looking forward to bringing you more of these stories in the coming weeks. I am also going to be diving back into the Napoleonic Wars series from Epic History TV. I may work on that series while I'm in Belgium. We'll see. But just be watching for that. And if you're interested in gaming, Victoria 3 comes out today, and I'm going to be streaming Victoria 3 live over on the gaming channel. Probably not long after this video comes out, so you can check that out. Thanks for watching.